This is happening right now. As of this morning, March 16th, 2026, the President of the United States personally reached out to 7 of America's closest allies and asked them to send warships into the Strait of Hormuz. 7 nations, one by one, and every single one of them said no, on the record, publicly, to the most powerful military on Earth. Let that sink in for a second. Not a quiet refusal behind closed doors. Not a diplomatic delay. A full, public, on-the-record rejection from the UK, Germany, France, Japan, South Korea, Canada, and Australia. And it didn't stop there. Germany, Greece, Italy, and Spain all went on record refusing without even being directly asked. Then the entire European Union weighed in collectively and said the same thing. 0 countries have committed a single warship. 0. We are now in week 3 of Operation Epic Fury. The Strait of Hormuz, the choke point that moves roughly 20% of the world's oil supply, is under effective Iranian control. Brent crude has blown past $100 a barrel. The Biden administration's biggest emergency reserve release in history isn't holding prices down. And the allied coalition that was supposed to materialize around American leadership, it doesn't exist. So today, I'm going to walk you through exactly why this happened, what it means for American power, and the one Iranian strategy that nobody in Washington seems to have seen coming. A move that is quietly peeling our allies away from us and pulling them straight toward Tehran. Stay with me. This is important. First, what actually happened this week. Trump posted on Truth Social calling on allied nations to send their navies. No response. He told the Financial Times that refusal would be, and these are his words, very bad for the future of NATO. Still no response. Then U.S. Ambassador to the UN Mike Waltz went on television and used a word that tells you everything you need to know about where the administration is right now. He said the United States demands allied participation. Demands. Not requests. Not invites. Demands. That is not the language of a superpower rallying a coalition. That is the language of a government that has run out of moves and knows it. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters that allied nations should contribute because they are, and this is her exact phrasing, benefiting greatly from the United States military taking out the threat of Iran. Translation: we started this war alone. We need you to treat it as a shared victory. And we need you to send your ships into a live combat zone to prove it. Not one country said yes. Now let's talk about why. Most people watching this are going to assume the rejection is just political theater. European leaders playing to their domestic base, hedging, avoiding risk. That's not what this is. The refusal is structural. It follows a logic so consistent across a dozen different capitals that it tells you something is broken at the very foundation of the alliance. Every nation that said no arrived there through different internal debates, but they all landed on the same answer. And the reasons behind that answer converge into a pattern the White House either cannot see or refuses to acknowledge. Reason 1: nobody was consulted. In the days before February 28th, Trump reportedly told Gulf Arab allies this would be finished in 4 days. Total Iranian capitulation. Kevin Hassett, the administration's chief economic advisor, went on the Sunday shows just this weekend and repeated a 4 to 6 week timeline, insisting the administration was ahead of schedule. That timeline was then directly contradicted by Israel's own military, which announced this week the war will last at least 3 more weeks with thousands of targets still remaining. Key allies felt, and they've said this publicly, that they were never given clarity on U.S. war aims, the exit conditions, or what victory actually looks like. Estonian Foreign Minister Margus Tsahkna put it plainly, what will be the plan? The Wall Street Journal reported this week the administration was planning to announce a convoy coalition as early as today. But buried in that same report was a detail that blows the whole thing apart. The nations involved are still debating whether operations would begin before or after a ceasefire. If the coalition only activates after the shooting stops, it is not a wartime alliance. It is a cleanup crew dressed up as a show of force. Reason 2. These are the same allies Trump spent years humiliating. He pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. He called NATO obsolete. He hit European steel and aluminum with tariffs. He publicly mocked Macron, Merkel, and Trudeau on the world stage. He threatened to withhold American military protection unless allies paid up. And now, the first time he genuinely needs their military cooperation, He's not asking for help. He's threatening consequences. He told the Financial Times that NATO faces a very bad future if countries don't comply. That is not coalition building. That is coercion from a position of weakness. And every foreign ministry on that call list recognizes exactly what it is. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer held a press conference and said his government will not be drawn into a wider war and that this was never envisioned to be a NATO mission. Trump's response was to mock him publicly from the White House for saying he needed to consult his team before making a decision. That is a sitting American president ridiculing the leader of our closest ally for following basic democratic process. Germany's Defense Minister Boris Pistorius gave a 7-word response that carries more weight than any policy paper. This is not our war. We have not started it. France's Macron referenced a possible future mission when circumstances permit. The circumstances he's waiting for is the end of the war, which means he's committed to nothing during the only window that matters. Reason 3. This war is costing European voters real money right now. Energy prices across the continent were already painful after the Russia-Ukraine period. Brent crude has now surged past $100 a barrel. Petrol prices are climbing across every EU member state. Natural gas is spiking because Qatar's liquefied natural gas, which European nations have leaned on heavily since cutting Russian supply, ships through the Strait of Hormuz, the very choke point that is now effectively sealed. Any European leader who sends warships into the Persian Gulf alongside the American Navy is ending their own political career. Spain's Defense Minister Margarita Robles delivered one of the sharpest rejections of the week. She said, "Spain will never accept any stopgap measures because the objective must be for the war to end, and for it to end now." Reason 4, and this one should genuinely alarm every American watching this. The war is directly enriching Russia. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said it publicly. The strait closure is funneling revenue into Moscow's war machine because every dollar oil climbs above $70 is another dollar funding Russia's campaign in Ukraine. And here's the part that is driving Brussels absolutely up the wall. The United States is simultaneously granting sanctions waivers allowing India and other nations to purchase Russian crude already at sea. NATO's entire strategic purpose is to counter Russia. The war Trump is waging against Iran is financing the exact adversary NATO was built to confront. And then he's asking European capitals to send their destroyers to the Gulf while his own Treasury Department is greenlighting Russian oil sales. That contradiction is not subtle. It is active policy. Now let's talk about the geography, because the military problem is severe. The Strait of Hormuz is roughly 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point. Iran controls the mountainous northern shoreline. Tehran has spent 4 decades preparing to threaten shipping there. Mines, ballistic missiles, drones, fast attack craft, submarines, a hardened coastal missile network built specifically for this confrontation. The U.S. military has already announced it destroyed 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels near the strait. That alone tells you how quickly any escort mission becomes a direct shooting war. And every allied defense ministry has one recent precedent burned into their memory: the Red Sea. A non-state militia with a fraction of Iran's capabilities shut down one of the busiest shipping lanes on Earth. 2 administrations launched strikes. Biden admitted they weren't working and kept going anyway. Trump did the same, then walked away. The Red Sea was never fully secured. If the full power of the American Navy couldn't reopen the Red Sea against the Houthis, no patchwork coalition is holding the Strait of Hormuz against the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And now, the part that most coverage has completely missed. Iran is not just blocking the strait. Iran is using the strait as a sorting mechanism. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi went on CBS and said it plainly: the Strait of Hormuz is open. It is only closed to American, Israeli, and Allied vessels. Others are free to pass. Then Tehran proved it. A Pakistani-flagged tanker transited the strait on March 16th carrying Abu Dhabi crude. 2 Indian LPG carriers passed through safely. A Turkish vessel received clearance. China is in direct negotiations with Iran for guaranteed passage of its crude and Qatari LNG shipments. France and the United Kingdom have reportedly opened back-channel talks with Tehran about securing their own vessels. Follow that logic all the way to its conclusion. Every Allied capital now faces a binary choice. Option 1. Join an American convoy mission and guarantee that Iran classifies your ships as hostile targets. Option 2. Negotiate directly with Tehran, stay out of the war, and keep your oil flowing. Washington is offering its partners the privilege of becoming combatants. Iran is offering them the privilege of becoming customers. For any government doing that math, the answer is obvious. This is the strategic play that nobody in the administration appears to have anticipated. Iran has converted the strait from a military choke point into a diplomatic lever, and it is actively using that lever to peel American allies away from U.S. leadership. Every nation that negotiates with Tehran for safe passage is implicitly recognizing Iranian authority over that waterway. Every successful transit arranged through Iranian channels is a quiet rejection of American power. The alliance isn't just failing to assemble, it is being disassembled from the outside by the very adversary this war was supposed to eliminate. The numbers tell the rest of the story. Before the war, 138 ships transited the strait every single day. As of this week, UK Maritime Trade Operations reports no more than 5. Oil exports through Hormuz have dropped below 10% of pre-conflict levels. The IA announced on March 11th the largest emergency reserve release in its 52-year history, 400 million barrels across 32 nations. The United States alone is contributing 172 million barrels from a strategic petroleum reserve that contains only 415 million total. That is 41% of America's entire emergency stockpile, and it has not stabilized prices. Crude climbed 17% in the days following the announcement. Iraq's southern oil production has collapsed 70%. Kuwait has announced precautionary output cuts. Global LNG supply is down 20%, and the deficit stands at roughly 12 million barrels per day, a gap that no combination of reserves, pipelines, and alternate routes can close. Here is where things stand tonight. The assumption going in, 4 days, total Iranian capitulation, the strait stays open, allies fall in line. The reality, Week 3, the strait under Iranian control, oil above $100, the largest reserve release in history failing to hold prices, and a unanimous public rejection from every allied capital Washington contacted. The assumption, regime collapse, quick coalition, escorts begin, global trade resumes. The reality, the son of the killed supreme leader assumed power within 72 hours and declared the strait will remain sealed as leverage. 0 nations have committed a single warship. Several are now negotiating directly with Tehran for the access Washington promised its coalition would provide. Dubai International Airport was struck by a drone today that hit a fuel depot and forced a temporary suspension of operations. Qatar intercepted a second wave of Iranian missiles this morning. North Korea fired multiple ballistic missiles 2 days ago. China has increased military activity around Taiwan. PLA headquarters is monitoring this conflict on live screens, tracking missile trajectories and strike patterns in real time. They are not intervening. They are studying. And David Sachs, a senior Trump administration advisor, publicly raised the specter of nuclear escalation this week. That remark stood out because it brought a scenario that is usually kept out of public discussion directly into the open. Put the full picture together, and the question becomes stark. The United States went into this conflict with 3 assumptions: speed, Allied support, and Iranian collapse. All 3 have failed to materialize. What's left is a military operation running on emergency petroleum reserves, a diplomatic coalition that exists only on paper, and an adversary that has turned its greatest vulnerability, control of a 21-mile waterway, into a tool for fracturing American alliances in real time. The next phase of this conflict will be decided by one of 3 actors: Washington, Tehran, or the dozen allied governments that have just told the most powerful military on earth that it is on its own. The only question tonight is which one moves first, and whether anyone in this administration has a plan for what comes after. Subscribe and hit the bell to stay updated as this develops. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think holds the leverage right now, and where does this go from here?